Twitch messes up all the time. You know, what is it? What can you do, eh? What can you do? It. Oh, it's Sunday, even though it's Saturday. Anyway, yeah, it's weird. Twitch does like all kinds of weird, stupid stuff. Winding me up when I didn't notice it before stream because there was a bloody great light here before because the window was open. Right. Places, people. Let's do some things. So, the king is not here. The king is apparently on his way, which is better than the status was yesterday, so take it. Hopefully that will be here tomorrow, maybe Monday, which one I can get him on stream then. Oh, Christ. Yeah, that was quite the week. It's been a lot going on. But here we are. The studio itself is in a vaguely alright space. The trolley that was here is now over there, which frees me up to do a bit more space, so I can just kind of go out there. It also gives me the ability, because I've shifted the airbrush booth that was here over here and changed the microphone, the camera setup. Other than the fact that the camera is currently burning at a temperature slightly hotter than the sun, I can do this and give away all the secrets of my streaming setup, but that's fine. At which point I can use the old airbrush. I don't know how much. I'm a shit, yeah. When told and engaged. Anyway. Yeah, it's a bit loud that. Also, it doesn't actually extract anywhere. It just it goes through this at the very least, I suppose. Yeah, pick some of it up, I'm sure. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so I've got the old microphone arm that used to be on, and a little bit of a ball joint. The Brio is now attached, and it is so hot. Ow. Yeah. Other than that, I went and picked up a full screen, I suppose, for gags like this. I got a curtain. A curtain for what, you might ask? A curtain for you. It's a curtain for you. It's a curtain for the backdrop. The photo booth, which I'm kind of debating where I want to keep it or not. At the moment, it just makes the most sense. It's at most out of the way. Central is successful, and it gives me a long enough distance that I can take photos with this thing when I borrow it. Because it literally has to be, the camera has to be on this stick, right? It's, my reach is about, 3.5, 4 foot. All the way over there. That's to be all the way over there to take photos in front of me. It just can't focus any closer than that. I'm regretting picking this up at this point. Yeah, just gonna pick this up. Oh, right. So, in the meantime, whilst the king approaches, and so that I can have a bit more confidence with another project that may be coming up. Let's talk big giant robot man. So this here is, can't remember, the 3D file I found essentially. what was it called? Oh, it's an OSP. Osprey, maybe? I don't know. It's a cheeky little Mac boy I printed out yesterday morning. And then I primed it up. And I primed it up in a very specific way. And that's kind of what I want to get into talking about here before we can really start. Is light and scale, right? Obviously this isn't a 6mm scale system, but it's a very large item, which is why they end up, being comparable in size to a regular miniature. But when like an 8-foot tall person is like 6mm tall, and this person should be that big, this thing is obviously building sized, right? So when you're depicting a building sized object, surely you would think there would be some changes in the way that light interacts with an object that big. There's a difference in the way that light is interacting with me and interacting with that. So how do we properly convey an object of greater size whilst also giving it some artistic flair and making it look cool? Yeah, and just basically differentiate it from an object that is Space Marine sized, like this being just like a walkie robot, and this being a gigantic mecha. Obviously, there's the first, most obvious answer is that you scale everything down that's around it in the small window into the world that we get. So instead of putting on grass stuffs and stuff, you just paint little bits of green onto a textured base. Include a few large items and then less small ones so that you don't distribute it the same way. You kind of scale the world down as best you can around it. If you include something like the corner of a broken building or something, that's going to obviously make it even more obvious. But more generally, I think the key is probably going to be in lighting. I'm pretty confident that we can see something. So what I'm going to do, got an example here pulled up on Google Street View. Right. So as you can see, we've got a, tell you what, I'll move over here. We'll just get a gauge for where the sun is, right? So we've got the sky, and as you can see, the sun is not up top, right? We're not dealing with the zenith here. The sun is not directly above us. We're not under the path of the sun, and it's not the very middle of the day in the middle of summer, right? So the sun is in fact over, I'm pretty sure it's over here in this photo. I'm not sure if it's actually below the horizon line, just blowing up into there, and the photo is just like taken on a fairly high exposure or something. Given where this is, I'm pretty sure this would be the morning. But either which way, we got it catching from a fairly low angle at the moment, right? And a lot of the times during the day, that's going to apply. Like, obviously, there's a big period where your sun is sort of here to over here in its arc, but it spends maybe half its time in these kind of thirds of the sky, right? So quite often when we want to actually convey something that is the size of a building, obviously we're going to have to do it outside. Unless we've got like a hangar setting, at which point you can get a bit more specific with your specific lighting options, your spotlights and bits and pieces and what have you. For the most part, we're going to be worrying about, okay, where is the sun coming from? And what angle is it coming in at? Because as you can see, and hopefully we'll have noticed just as I'm kind of messing around here, the lighting on a building is really dramatic, especially in these earlier times of day when there's not quite as much fill light from how high the sun is. Like a cast directional sun it's like a spotlight. It really is. The light that is coming from the sun is a beam. It's not being scattered through all that much. Obviously, there's a little bit of it being scattered through the atmosphere. That's why we get the blue, and it's why things further away don't appear quite as bright because they get kind of muddled on their way to you. Quite as dark, sorry. And, like the shadows over here are a lot closer to the highlights than they are in the foreground. Because of the amount of air that they're having to pass through and the amount of just disparate light that gets muddled up. As you can see on these shapes, it's very distinctive. The cast shadows are very, very crisp. They give very, very harsh lines at this scale. But then, in general, with a light source as bright as the sun, and with the space that is available for light to bounce around, undercuts like this, see the shadow, you don't lose detail in the shadows. Right? It's not like, oh, the sun's over here, and therefore I can't see anything here. This is not a campfire scene. This is not standing in the dark and someone's got a candle in front of their face. This is the sun illuminating everything. It's just that over here, it's doing a much better job. Right? So we think about what we're looking at. So essentially, you have bands of light. You know, you have this exposed, this is less exposed, this is even less so. So this is our like 50% sort of mark, where it's just the other half of the light that isn't like getting absorbed, getting bounced back and finding somewhere else to be absorbed or bounced back to your eyes. Because over here we got 100%. And even when you get a cast shadow here, literally, again, no detail is lost. The sun is never obfuscated on a sunny day. Now, all of these rules change slightly if this was a cloudy day. If this was a cloudy day, the clouds work a lot like a light diffuser. Everything becomes a lot softer. The shadows all fade away. Everything becomes, you know, this. Like these slight, subtle changes in brightness. Okay. This is the butter market in Ipswich, by the way. It's a place. So here we can see essentially, like we know from in miniature, from filmmaking, that we can replicate realistically in miniature believable footage, right? You think, okay, how do we do that? How do we take a thing that is a tenth the scale that it should be and match it in a controlled environment rather than just letting the sun do its job? You can see here the way that they've done that. Big fill light, massive fill light, is casting all this light down here. Got a lot of camera angles here. Yeah. Yeah, so it's casting all this light down here, all this soft blue light. It's casting these. It's really not even casting any shadows at all. It's kind of casting some of this one a little bit, but realistically, like this is so soft. It's just filling in the light. It's doing this, right? Because this spotlight over here would not be doing this. It will just do this, and then it will do what we as painters tend to do, which is fill the darkest areas in with darker. Essentially. So what we see them doing here, in order to emulate the effects of the regular space and also the sharp angle that the sun will be coming down at this sort of time when the light temperature will be this warm, they're physically blocking it off. And they're blocking it off quite close. Because the closer the objects are together, the harder the shadows are going to be. Again, there's less bounce light and stuff interfering with the effect that you've got. As we saw earlier, too far. Yeah, cast shadows from building to building are pretty hard. Yeah, okay, cool. This great, Chris. You've taught me all about how buildings like get lit up by the sun. Brilliant. Okay, where do we get to the big stumpy mags? Okay, calm down. We'll get there. Right now. So what did I do in priming this? So the big thing for me when talking about under priming for an object like this, in the principles as I understand them, is that nothing should be black, because this object is too big for the shadows to be black in a daylight setting. Okay, like this, I haven't left any pure black space underneath. This is not just a zenithal. I don't just go black prime or white. Everything is grey. Right? I did prime it with the black primer because that's what I've got, but I sprayed everything with a dark grey. And then all of the light is coming from one position, which is pretty much you right now. Right? This is the one position where I held the white to spray it down. As you can see, as we turn away, everything that is not in the light is caught in some sort of shadow. And to my mind, that makes this like a hell of a lot of a bigger depiction of something than this. Because the amount of fill light able to get into these nooks and crannies, because they're so small, is so much less than the amount of reflected fill light they can get underneath of an object this large. It's just the scale of the lighting that we're talking about. There is going to be reflected light at all times. It's only when we get into indoors, nighttime, small objects, we start talking about having actually black shadows. Now, some of these recesses will be black. It's not like there is no such thing as a dark little cubby, and also it's a miniature. We have to worry about definition, right? I don't necessarily even want to wash with a true black, necessarily, especially depending on how bright my color is. If we go back to this, and you have a look up in here, there is no true black. Even if in these darkest tiny little recess shade cubbies, none of this would actually be black. It's pretty dark, like seriously dark. But you don't start talking about things being black until you're there, at which point it's tucked with like 6 feet away from any light source with objects in the way, well off of the floor, which the light would be bouncing off. Which actually, that's another principle, potentially. I didn't really consider. We might get some of that happening just naturally, to be fair, because the physical way that the real light is going to work on the miniature. Because if this is sufficiently off the floor, then tucked under here or something would actually be darker than tucked under here. At least somewhat. Because again, there's just that much more access bounce light. But yeah, the physical existence of the miniature in a lighting space will fake some of that in. Obviously not necessarily in like beauty shots, but in physical handling, it will it'll be fine. So, there's the theory behind it. There's the idea. The next question, how do we paint this model? I have some thoughts. First of all, I want to try laying down some inks over this, just to see how much that muddies up the effect of the lighting here. And these like sort of hard transitions, whether we lose some of that once we've got the ink filter over there. And then I also want to try a couple of different bits and pieces. We'll get into it. We'll get into it. So that's going to mean grabbing this and grabbing that. Yellow. Oh my god, he's a fool. We'll be alright. So. Let's grab this. Change this up. I really think that I can do this now. I won't just subject you all to the ultra turbine of the filter for this particular instance. I'm not using it a whole lot. Just going to thin it down a touch. Got some nice yellow ink. Mix her up a little bit. Do that. Do that with the airbrush. I would say so, honestly. If not for anything else than just like the fact that you know you've bought it and therefore you should airbrush in it, rather than airbrushing everywhere else. Obviously, to some extent, it's dependent on if you actually have space for it. But as you can see, the amount of spray that's all over it and not all over everything else. That's partially because I use paper on the table, but the amount of black that's from priming that's just all over the. So I'm not going to turn it on in this particular instance. I have got a small fan blowing across this way anyway. Go. Far out. Just going to try and get it pretty even. going to wash that airbrush out. Cleany, cleany, cleany. Okay. That'll do. Right, let's get this back in the normal position. So, I'd say that has actually worked reasonably well. There is still, that clear hard edge transition. The color is clearly there, even in the recesses. It just loses a lot of its vibrancy. Which, to be fair, if this was any color other than yellow, probably wouldn't be quite as bad, apart from maybe red. When we look at it from the light's perspective, pretty much everything's even. Look at it from the shadow's perspective, pretty much everything's even. There is the question of, is it aesthetic? There's also a question of, has it been leveled out a little bit in regards to the values by the yellow. It probably has a little bit. So it's not the worst. I think I've lost a decent amount of the drop shadow from the gun. You can see it before it was probably about like that. And now it's pretty much completely gone. I think I overhit it with the yellow a little bit. Got it. Okay, yeah. Cool. That's a step in the right direction. I think the next thing I want to do is hit it with varnish. Yeah. Because I can fiddle with some stuff whilst it's drying from a varnish coat. I just can't wash it for a good while. The wash step's not going to be able to be done until like closer to the end of the stream, I don't think. But that should be fine. Yeah, so I think what we'll do is we'll grab a matte varnish so that I can still work over it. Get somewhere, hit it with the gloss, do something else for an hour or two, and then we'll hit it with the wash, your wash. Ideally, I'd like to leave it until like tomorrow or something after applying a gloss, but I just need to apply something for the time being. Otherwise, it won't. It'll be too easy to rub the ink off of the model. Probably should have. I suppose, yeah. In future, when I do a filter like that, I should probably include some matte varnish into the ink, or just like something that's a little bit more durable than ink, because ink is especially fragile. I'm gonna hit this real quick. It's crazy how much that's just changed on the camera. Was it that like pale for you guys earlier? It still looks like really neon for me, so I don't cause that. Anyway. Let's talk about some colours. Oh yeah, you can see the conditions that I put myself through for you people. Right. There's a couple of things I want to try. With this model, see what they look like when I do them. I want to see some like slightly scuffed up like hazard striping effects when I go. I want to see how a couple of specific colors look together because they look pretty good in an artwork that I saw of a potential color scheme. Yeah. So interestingly, because I've applied this with the airbrush, and it's like such a specific and intentional color scheme, if I screw up, I am screwed. Because patching this color of yellow is possibly quite literally impossible without making sufficient changes to just like basically have restarted. So we'll see how we go. Because it is way too highlighter at the minute to be just like a normal acrylic paint. So flowy today, crazy. Right, so I'm gonna grab some of this grey. The Flue Improver. I don't necessarily need it right now, but I'll thin it somehow. Just gonna grab. There's a good spot. Something like this. I've got these little lines that have been put in by my so for some reason. Starting to think my print is just a bit bad, to be honest. It does some weird stuff. Really on the fence about. I'm going to spend money coming up real soon. Because I do really want to get to having the Elegoo set as quick as possible, but I've also got like a couple of events coming up I'm going to save for Adepticon. Adepticon next year, I basically, I'm just not going to manage it. It's too much. Like I can't just summon like 3.5 grand out. It's not gonna happen. But making it by 2024 might be feasible by comparison. So hold out some hope, actually. Wow, it is drying on my brush. That is impressive. The time it takes me to literally get from the wet palette to the model, my brush is drying. I'm not flowing properly. X out. Yeah. Tracing the path. In theory, when you set yourself in line with a hazard stripe, even if it changes direction in terms of twisting out away from you, it should still stay straight from your perspective. It's kind of the idea. Yeah, I actually really expected Battletech to be in a slightly bigger scale. I don't know why. But I just think if it was like maybe 10mm scale, so these things were like that 40% bigger, they'd be a lot more paintable. But like a long time I've been surprised at the level that a lot of Battletech is painted at. Because I know that a lot of really great painters have gone over, and I was expecting it to be like, you know, intense Ghost Keel, Warlord Titan level paint jobs start showing up, but they just really don't seem to be present. I'm realizing now that's probably because it's just not big enough models for those sorts of paint jobs. So even though the model line is of big objects, it is not actually big sculpts. Okay, so I'm feeling the most straight at the moment. Being honest, I feel like I've curved it slightly. It is lacking just a little bit down. Interestingly, another little principle about light is that color can only become as bright as it is. Probably do that on screen so it's not projected. What do I mean by that? So there is only so much saturation available to a color, but you can keep throwing light at it. It will not become more saturated than it physically is. So when you're dealing with, and it's also true for, to some extent, right? If you're dealing with enough light that you cause a reflection because you oversaturate the light absorbency of an object, so like you're putting more light in than it could physically absorb its color of, you will get and like some of that extra light will bounce back and it will mess with things. But if you're putting out pretty much as the sun does, so you're getting as bright as you really can without causing a reflection, your color will only be as bright as it is. So that's why you will see, even on like a bright white wall, right, in blazing sunlight, if you put a black stripe across it, it's going to look black, right? Doesn't matter how much sunlight is currently on that white wall, the black stripe is going to be black, right? So when we're doing these grey colours and things, you can go decently dark, even in a really bright area. You just have to be careful that you're always leaving yourself enough room to get darker once you go into the recess. If your thing is literally pitch black, and there's nothing else you can do about that, then there's nothing else you can do about that. If you are trying to paint some sort of astral dark that isn't actually there and physically couldn't get darker if it wanted to, fine. Make it black. But it will stand out all the more if every other grey that you've painted is actually a grey and gets darker once it goes around the corner. Gone too dark here. This is paint, not just a shadow, so I can go darker. That's the other thing, is even in a situation where you shouldn't have shadows, a black object is still going to be black. I'm not going to slop that just by lighting. Hopefully that should look pretty smooth. It doesn't look like it changes colour, right? It's not really any perception that as I turn this line that it actually changes. Really? It does. It's black there. It's grey here. That's when you know you're doing it right. We're going for this sort of selling a realism by faking the lighting type approach. Type of mini that looks completely different when you put it in a soft light box versus actually being in actual light. Suddenly realise how controlled the shadows are. Pretty frustrating how quickly the paint is drying on my brush and making it so it won't actually leave onto the model. Is relatively impractical to paint in such a situation. I've actually ended up here. I mean, something when I think about it, I didn't actually really want. Because there's a sort of gradient on this surface because of the way that I've airbrushed. Which isn't actually what I would want. I would want it to be even across this surface, and just be slightly less bright than on the top. I've actually ended up with the wrong solution. So maybe if you're going for like perfect realism, obviously you'd want to do every single panel individually in its own shade of grey before you even start. I would say, in order to make the full use of this sort of underpainting. But obviously, if you just want to get close enough, good enough for government work, as it were, this will do. I'll lift the brush up a bit more, see if that helps with the drying problem. I think the base, these two, ended up being thinner than one another. So what I'll probably do is thicken the other line up. Second. You can see the difference here between just continuing with the same color directly over this and actually following the gradient with the other gray. You see just how bizarre it is that it looks like the same color all the way around. Yeah, this one actually is the same color all the way around. It just gets completely lost. Mix on diagonal. oddly, like, obviously I looked at a lot of pictures of buildings to kind of develop the opinions for that little soapbox at the beginning. And interestingly, these sorts of like diagonals here, the diagonal that is like directly touching the brightest face can sometimes actually be darker than the next face over, right? So say this is the corner of a building or something. If the light is like hitting this, but it's hitting it from like backwards a little bit, like over here, right? It can be bouncing off so much stuff on this other side and hitting that one at angles that are better designed to come back towards the viewer, towards you, that this little strip in the middle can actually end up darker, which is fun. Because you wouldn't think that would be the case, but you think, oh, well, the light is hitting this wall. Let's just draw this. Right, like if my brightest light is hitting this way, then surely this must be like number 2 and this will be number 3. But it's not necessarily the case. Because if enough light is actually coming in from this way and then bouncing off a wall over here, it will come back there, bounce off that, head straight to the viewer. Whereas this is only getting light in from that direction, or like that direction. Or if you're lucky, it's like bouncing off something over here, going over there, going behind you, and then hitting this. Like, it's, yeah, interesting. I need at least one more stripe on this, probably. Or I can move on. First, I actually need to fatten this one up just a touch. At the top. And even distribution again, probably set this corner about right, slightly over. Nice tight pull downs to try to get a straight line. Catch this corner here. Got mix. Do fold over. Like basically straight down. I'm not sure I can be bothered to do that for that, just that practice, but okay. I'm just curious. Let's see, edge highlights, not a realistic thing, but if it were to do them, just a touch. This, probably I'll take a white scar will do. basically white and just put like a little bit of this yellow ink in it. Just catch lines. I'm gonna go ahead and paint in those little like lugs on the shin. It's just being grey. I'm just curious what a completely flat colour is going to look looking like right next to this complex lighting stuff. That's what I might probably do if I do something similar to the technique again, is rather than filtering with the colour, maybe you take a darker version of the main colour that you want, airbrush it all over, and then just like pick a specific direction, especially one that you've got like some panels that you want to hit in, and then yeah, shoot the brighter version of that colour on, rather than going for a grayscale and then filling in. Partially because then you know any colour you need to patch is just going to be a combo between those two colours that you've sprayed. I think that would probably be smarter. As far as ways of painting things are concerned. So I need to just catch an edge of this as well. Right. These in top points just to give them something going on. It's not going to a dark colour in the shadows yet, so it's look fine. Okay, interesting. Details on these are way smaller than I always thought they were. If I was going to then turn around and go, okay, well, I want actually is to do something on the wings. So if I grab this grey, and I just paint it over the wings. Best to actually get to the edges and not remove them. Two coats kind of situation. Painted that grey, and then I painted under here. I wouldn't go to a full black, I would go like so. Whilst it is a grey, it's got quite a lot of fill white. I wouldn't want it going to black. paintability standpoint, things aren't actually looking too good. Because of that decision to use the yellows in the way that I did.